join us today here for Porch Talk. Got me another glass of tea. It's hot here. Here in eastern Oklahoma, the weather has been hot. We've been up around 100 every day. The heat index today, I think, was 114. So, and I feel it. It is hot. Anyway, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our new subscribers and everyone that's commented on any of the videos. I am trying to comment back if I can at all possible, and so I appreciate your comments and your subscriptions. If you would, the little bell up there by the subscribe button, if you'd click that, then each week when we have our coffee talk, tea time, porch talk, whatever you want to call it, why we'll have that at 7 o'clock each Tuesday. So I try to have a video up at 2 o'clock or 7 o'clock on Tuesdays, and then on Thursdays I'll try to have a cattle talk. I've been doing that. If you're into cattle, raising cattle is something we do here, and I try to have some type of video there. A lot of my videos would not really help an experienced cattleman, but if you're someone, but maybe it would, but if you're a young cattleman getting started, well, maybe some of that would help you. And then I try to air videos occasionally as I can, just about things that's going on here at our homestead. But I wanted to get on the subject today, and that is a follow-up from last week. Is there a food shortage? And this is kind of an update to that. And it appears around here locally that our stores are full of food. There doesn't seem to be a shortage at our groceries. Now, the Walmart store that's located about 20 miles to our east, there are signs up, and some of the canned vegetables are low. So I want to get at something here and answer this question. Is there a food shortage? And I think there is a minor food shortage. Does that mean you need to run out and panic? No, I am not preaching that, teaching that. And I'm going to tell you something about me on my channel. I have nothing to sell you except just telling you how I see it. And I investigate, check things out, and it seems to be a big argument right now of what's happening, what's taking place. And you hear some saying it's global warming. Some say it's a grand solar minimum. Some blame it on Trump. I mean, anything at all to blame what's happening. Now, us having a major food shortage, no. But there is a minor food shortage, and it is a time of concern. And I shared that last week. I don't mean to be an alarmist or nothing, but this is a lifestyle that I have lived practically my whole life. We were raised up raising our own chickens, hogs. They used to get together and have hog killings. And over time, people have gotten away from that. It was a time, if you lived here in rural Oklahoma, everybody prepared. Everyone gardened. Everyone canned. Those that lived in town and didn't have enough stuff to can would buy from other people or trade or barter to get corn and beans or whatever they needed. One man might trade another man some hogs for a beef. Primarily around here, people ate pork because pork didn't need refrigeration. When I came along, we had refrigeration, praise the Lord. But in my dad's time, they did not have refrigeration. And my grandfather and great-grandparents, just to tell you a little bit of history here, because all throughout the ages, people have prepared and preserved food until this last century and probably the last 50 years, and especially, and it's escalating up the past 50, 40, 30, 20, and now less and less people know how to preserve food. So the less people there are that are prepared if something happens. let's just use for an example, let's just say that there is global warming. I don't believe in global warming, but let's say that's the case. Then if it is, there's going to be dire consequences based upon what the scientists say. So let's say for a minute that the grand solar minimum is real. People say that's real. I'm looking into that right now. Really, I don't know for sure about the grand solar minimum. Let's just use for practical purposes that is fact and it is going to happen. Then what do we need to do? We need to be prepared. Does that mean we need to be alarmist and running around when screaming and hollering and just spending every dollar we got? No. But I believe we need to always be prepared regardless. So my grandparents, great-grandparents, moved from a little town called Oil Trough, Arkansas. They come and settled up near Tahlequah, Oklahoma, way back at when Oklahoma was just becoming a state. So they had my grandfather. He grew up. In the process, they purchased this property that I live on right here now, was purchased by my great-grandfather and given to my grandfather. And then my dad got it, now I've got it, and my son, the only child we have, he will inherit it upon my demise one of these days, should the Lord tarry. So throughout all those generations, they raised their own food, mostly their own food. They had to have staples such as coffee and sugar and tea and baking powders and things like that, but they primarily raised their own food and preserved. When my great-grandmother passed away, her cupboards were full of food, and she would tell you that she believed there was a day coming when we were going to have trouble like in the Great Depression time, and she was concerned that people wouldn't have enough food to eat. When my grandfather died, his freezers, by that time, you know, electric had come on and stuff, and I was a young man and stuff then, and but he had his freezers full, his cupboards were full. They were still in their elderly age. They were still raising a garden and still preserving food, and they had not lost that skill. My dad's generation, he done it. My dad did. When I was a little boy, we raised our own chickens. My dad would oftentimes, most springs, he'd order in 100 or 200 baby chickens. He didn't get the broiler type like people are using today. He would order in like roosters. Those was the cheapest. And he would order them in, and we would raise 100 or 200 chickens. And we would get out here and butcher them. The whole family got out and worked and helped butcher them. We'd raise hogs, and my dad would put up the meat. Neighbors and friends and people would come over. They would have a hog killing and put up the meat. I only remember my dad butchering one beef on his own, and right across the road from where I live, they hung a beef up and they butchered that beef. And one of my uncles, he would come and help you for the beef if he could have the liver. I don't care for beef liver, but he loved it, and he'd come and get that big old liver, and he'd put it in a broiler pan and take it home. Anyway, from that time to now, most of the people that used to preserve their own food, butcher their own animals, and knew how to do those things have quit. So you're seeing a regeneration now of folks that are getting back into it. Some were raised that way. Some have never been into it, but they feel a yearning, a leading to get back into this lifestyle of preserving their own food. Somebody commented last week that they were older and weren't able. I actually had more than one say this. And I've had people tell me out in public that they weren't able to preserve their own food. They're not able to butcher a hog anymore. They're no longer able to butcher a beef. So if they have a beef, they have to take it to a processor. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of them have said that what they do is they go to the stores and they actually buy canned vegetables and things, and they're still putting back food enough to get them for, say, 6 months to a year, and they've done it for years, but instead of canning their own, they're doing that, and that's fine, whatever you have to do. But folks have gotten away from that, and in the winter time is the hardest time of the year. If a food shortage crisis happened during the winter, you can't grow nothing in the winter. Now, I realize folks are getting into greenhouses. Now, I'm talking about here in Oklahoma, where I live at. Maybe you live in an area that you can grow a year round. I see people that's got stuff way earlier than we do. So, again, I'm going to get back to this grand solar minimum for just a minute. If it was true, and we had surmised a while ago, let's say that's going to happen. When I was a kid, and maybe you all have forgotten this, but we were told that there was an ice age coming, and that the earth was going to revert back to the ice age. Tell me that today. It was so hot today, it's hard for me to believe we're going back into an ice age. Also, I'm going to say this, and I'm not arguing this point, I'm just bringing out a little bit different look at things. Then we had the global warmingness crowd. I mean, the ozone's getting big. Now, the earth is heating up, folks. We have been hotter this past year. When you look at the statistics, we were warmer than normal overall. And we continue to go a little bit more. So whether you would call it the global warming people that's out there saying it's all because of the ozone and all that, I have to agree that our temperatures are warming up. I'm not agreeing with this global warming leftist mentality that we need to get rid of all of the cows and we need to get rid of all the cars and all that. I'm not for that at all. But I am telling you that used to in November, deer season was always the week of Thanksgiving, and we would usually kill a deer the first day, or several deer the first day, and we'd hang them up in the barn, and we would go ahead and hunt throughout that season period. And you could kill a doe and a buck, usually is the way most seasons was. So we'd usually get our buck first, then we'd hunt for a doe later, or we'd help some other one fill their tag. But we'd have a barn with several deer in it, and my grandpa would skin those deer out after deer season. It was too busy during deer season, but we would gut them and let them hang in the barn. Sometimes skin them and let them hang. Sometimes they'd leave the skin on there. And they believed it aged the meat and make it taste better. I always loved the meat, the deer meat. I mean, whether it was aged or not, a fresh killed deer versus one that hung, I can't tell you that I know that much difference, but I loved it. And it's still good today. Anyhow, now if you tried to kill a deer and let it hang all week in the week of Thanksgiving, it would run on you. Now, if this grand solar minimum is true, that's going to reverse, and we should go back from what I've listened to folks say. We should be going back where it's going to be cooler winters. But so far, our winters have been hotter. And I'm just going to honestly tell you, I like the warmer winters. This has been good. When you feed cows, last winter, I never had to bust ice. Not one time did I have to bust ice. I usually have to put a heater out here in my stock tank. I didn't have to do that last year. I like that. So I kind of enjoy that. But I believe there's side effects. There's probably things that's happening in our climate, not due to the ozone getting bigger and to greenhouse gases and all that, but something is happening. And so I'm not going to promote exactly which one is happening except one promotion. And God says in the Bible, Jesus said in Matthew 24, he said in the last days there would be earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in divers places, meaning lots of places. Folks, we're seeing that in lots of places today. We're seeing things that boggles the mind. In all the way from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Keystone Lake, all the way down to where the Arkansas River dumps into the Mississippi, there has been massive flooding. We're still recouping here from the massive flooding that took place. Never seen anything like this. And those fields that were flooded, my grandpa used to tell me this, that once a field flooded, you could replant it and you would get a dandy crop because it would cover it with old sand and stuff all over it. And he used to say that you'd grow some of your best corn. Over here in the river bottom, they've got corn up. After the flood, they replanted corn, and they've got corn up now that is tasseling, already tasseling, and I mean it's beautiful corn. Where it was just wiped out. If they did have anything planted, wheat, whatever planted out there, it was destroyed totally, and I mean just covered it over with sand and stuff, something like I have never seen before. But my grandfather said before they built these dams, that would happen on a regular basis. He farmed off to my south right here. My grandfather leased land and grew crops and pulled horses and used old tractors, the old tricycle type John Deere tractors, to farm all that down in there. And my dad has took me and showed me, since somewhere the river now stays flooded year round, that he used to work alfalfa fields and other type fields, watermelon fields and things like that. So they used to happen, they'd grow. This year where they have, it's come back. Now usually they get 2 crops in their fields. This year they're only going to get 1. So some may argue, is there going to be some type of shortage when it comes this fall harvest? And I'm going to believe when the numbers are tallied, it is. I seen today that the corn and soybean and wheat harvest this year is going to be one of the lowest since like 2013. So that is independent numbers. The government's supposed to be releasing their numbers. I think Monday they release those. So release those numbers, so I haven't paid attention to what that exactly is. I also want to tell you something about beef while I have you on here today and you're listening. Up in Finney County, I believe it is, in Kansas, Tyson's had a beef plant burn that produces about, they say they butcher about 6,000 animals a day, and they're running at 90% capacity or were. Last Friday they had a fire. The cattle market, the fatted cattle, have dropped to Monday on the futures market. Don't have any, I don't delve into that, except I was watching that and it dropped. The reason was that plant went down, burnt down. It's totally offline now. So you have 6,000 animals every day that cannot be harvested. So you figure that up. Now 6,000 animals turned into quarter pounders. That's quite a deal there. So the fat cattle, the ones like people like me that raise cattle and sell cattle, I don't sell the fat cattle, but folks who do, they're going to hurt a little bit because they're going to have to absorb 6,000 butcher-ready animals every day, and no telling for how long. Now, how does that affect you? If you go to the supermarket today, I would say you'd see no difference in food prices. But I would say come probably October, November, as the freezer supplies start going down, you're going to see some price increase what you pay at the store. So if you had a time right now to stockpile a little bit of, to prep back a little bit of beef, if you find it on sale at your local grocer, maybe you ought to buy back. I'm also going to say this about food. I believe food has jumped about 25% just here in the least little bit. And a lot of things that were costing $1 are now $1.25. I don't go to the store regularly, but I did go in the other day and I was noticing that some things that we did buy, like spaghetti sauce in a can, was $1 a can, and now they're charging $1.25. There was a few other little items that I was like, wow, we were paying that, and now they're $1.25. Vienna sausages, I was buying those for 50 cents a can. I know they're not the healthiest thing in the world for you, but I like to eat them, and they would be a good little prepper meat item to put back. Ours just don't last that long, but I'll used to eat at least a can of those per week, and because of my cholesterol and all that kind of good stuff, well, I'm supposed to kind of stay away from those, but I probably eat a can of those a week. But I noticed at Atwood's Saturday that they were 69 cents a can, and I was getting those for 50 cents a can, and sometimes I could get the Armour kind. I like the Armour brand. That's just my favorite brand. I don't like those off-brand ones. And but for a while you could actually get some for 45 cents or less per can. But anyway, from my estimation, 20 to 25% increase, and I believe that's going to be one of the problems, is being able to afford to buy food. And I noticed that the restaurants are going up. A lot of the restaurants here locally have printed new menus. It's because their prices are going up. So in the future, will you be able to buy your food? So one thing is the world population is increasing. I think there's more of a demand on our food. I'm going to say something about China too. If China was to make a deal with President Trump and started buying our pork, they say that we do not produce enough pork to supply China. If we provided all of our pork in the United States, we couldn't feed China. China has got a deal against Canada. They're not buying from Canada. They're not buying much of anything from us. But there is reports that if they did start, it could cause our prices to increase if China starts buying from us. If we reduced our tariffs on China junk that we get from them, then it would cause our food prices to go up. I'm sorry, here comes the train. Hopefully it's loaded with food. There comes the Trump train. But anyhow, you know, China also, they say, is stockpiling food. This was on Fox News just recently, that they're stockpiling food. I don't know where they're buying it from. If they're not getting it from us and they're not getting it from Canada, maybe they're buying it from Australia or wherever, but they're stockpiling some food. I'll tell you one thing why they might be stockpiling food, and I hope this is the reason. It's been reported that China thinks that Trump will not be re-elected on this next election period. Now, this thing of dealing with China is not just a Republican issue. There are Democrats that are for it as well. But anyway, Trump, they think won't get re-elected, so they're going to try to hold out on their deal making on this intellectual properties. You know, they still are our information. They still are rights to properties here, and they do it all over the world, and they don't play fair. So Trump's like, you know, if you're going to do that and you're going to buy from us, and China is really bad about, they can be big ships full of corn or soybeans, and they just turn them back. Now, we don't want them, not going to take them. They're hard to deal with. So they're stockpiling food for that purpose. The other thing that concerns me with China is that China may be stockpiling food in a plan to go to war. If their people were to get hungry, I haven't heard this on the news, it's just something that's been on my heart lately, but if they were to get hungry and desperate, China would go to war. You know, there's been concern, even the politicians have talked about this, that they could do an EMP and cripple our country to the point that we couldn't do anything to protect other nations because we'd be so busy taking care of ourselves that they would go and attack foreign nations or South America or wherever, and this could very well be something that they're working on. You know, I don't trust China. And I was going to say this, there's a lot of folks, you know, the news media makes it sound like that all the farmers are against Trump, and that is not true. In fact, I have to search long and hard to find one farmer that's opposed to Trump and his policies. Now, a lot of them say we don't like his little tweeting, we don't like some of the things he does. Sometimes he stirs the hornet's nest when maybe he ought to be a little more careful. You know, let that sleeping dog lie, they say, you know, or if the more you stir poop, the more it's going to stink. So, you know, that kind of stuff. And they think Trump might ought to be a little more careful with some of that. But the farmers say this is something that's needed in a long time. This war with China, as far as this trade war, was needed. And they just wish it would get over and help them with their prices. This Zach Johnson, he is a millennial farmer on YouTube, has a wonderful channel there. And he is really growing by leaps and bounds and has done well. And CBS did an interview with him about the floods and things that's going on. You know, and he said, well, we've always had to deal with that. We've always had to deal with the weather. They also asked him about the trade war, and he said that as far as he knew, the farmers in his area are all behind Trump. The news media will find one every once in a while that ain't, and they'll portray it like all the farmers are against Trump. And China wants to turn the farmers against Trump because the farmers and the rural people, which is made up primarily of farmers, most rural people, you say, I'm not a farmer. If you grow a garden, you're a farmer. You may not show the income on your taxes because you're raising it for your own consumption, but if you raise a garden, if you raise raised beds, you are a farmer. If you raise chickens, you're a rancher of some sort. So don't think it's just the big ones. The big ones, they bark the loudest, but us little guys, the little farmers and ranchers, are just as important as they are. But they also tried to get him to say negative about Trump, and Zach didn't have anything negative. It's really a good interview. You can find that on YouTube. It was through CBS News, but the news media, they won't talk to you real long if they can't get you to turn against Trump or turn against conservatism. And Zach, he wouldn't blame it on global warming. In my lifetime, we have dealt with some extremes here. It seems like those extremes, though, are getting more abundant. And as far as there being a food shortage, I would say we're going to start seeing more of, like this canned vegetable shortage that Walmart has had. We're going to start seeing more of that. Or perhaps a little run on coffee where there's a shortage of coffee. Or there was a while back a shortage of avocados. I love guacamole. I like avocados, but that didn't really change my life all that much. But to some people it probably did. But there was a shortage on them around the Super Bowl. So I think we're going to see more and more things happening. The small, what we might consider small, but they could develop into big things. I also want to say this. The Lord has led me to this a long time ago. I didn't just start preparing this way. We didn't even know folks were calling themselves homesteaders, that's something new. About 3 years ago, I started watching. My wife said, watch YouTube, you would like that. And she brought me on to some people, Deep South Homestead. And so we started watching Danny and Wanda on there, and they started later doing a Saturday night show, and we'd sit right here on the porch and we'd watch them on Saturday night. And I was like, hey, these folks are doing what we've been doing for a long time. We just didn't know that you called it homesteading or prepping or anything like that. So we started watching some people that called themselves preppers and stuff like that. So, one thing led to another. And I was like, the Lord dealt with me on this a long time ago. And I've been doing it. But I get ridiculed. There's been some trolls and people since I've been doing these videos. Not very many, but there's a few that want to comment and be ugly about it all. This is what I say. Noah, when he began to build the ark. If you're a Christian and you know anything about the Bible, Noah, God told Noah to build an ark. It never had even rained before, and Noah started building that ark. He didn't probably fully understand what rain was going to do and what all would happen, but he started building the ark and preparing because God told him to. And he stored the food in the ark for the animals, and then he brought the animals 2 by 2 and into the ark. And one day it began to rain just like God said. God showed Joseph that there was going to be so many years of famine and so many years of plenty, and told him to put back in the years of plenty for the years of famine. And I believe if you're always prepared, always preparing, and not just wait until you're totally out of stuff, but always prepare. Have a little coffee put back. Have a little canned vegetables back. And I'm just going to give you real quickly, if you want to get into this and get started, don't rush out and buy a bunch of junk you won't eat. And don't go spending yourself into poverty. Go each week and buy you a few extra cans of vegetables. If you're going to go to the store, buy a few cans extra green beans this week. Next week, buy you a few extra corn. Slide them under your bed. Do what you can. I've been preaching this to folks for a long time. Telling folks this, sharing it with folks before I ever got on YouTube. And a lot of folks have told me that have moved into the rural area around here. They say, hey, we felt something. And we felt a leading to get away from the big cities and to start a rural life and start preserving our own food. We just don't understand it. We've had relatives and folks think we're nuts. Hey, folks thought I was nuts before I ever started any of this. So anyway, I just want to tell you today to hang in there. Don't lose faith. There's lots of folks. You're not alone. There are thousands of folks that are felt a leading towards homesteading and prepping. I realize there are extremes. There's folks that I think have gone extreme with the prepping deal and have gone cuckoo maybe. But I'm going to tell you, if they feel led to do it, I say go on. There's folks too that are in this thing, and if you don't agree with them 100%, they get mad at you. And I've had some comments of folks that think I need to follow what they're doing, and I'm sorry, but I feel I'm doing what God wants me to do, and I think I'm headed in the right way. And if I can encourage you or help you to go in the right direction, I certainly want to do that. I love this homesteading community that's been developed through YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, and I tell you, it's a good community here. And once again, I want to thank you for watching today. May God richly bless you, and we'll see you next Tuesday here at 7 o'clock for Porch Talk. We're gone.